this story. Once upon a time in the last century, older people knew more than younger people. And little kids would sit on old people's laps and learn about information and have gates to information every year that they grew older. And one day, little Billy ran away from school. And he said, I have a new way, a new gate to information. I'm going to unlock all the gates, and I'm going to give anybody who can use these little keys, I'm going to give them the keys to information. Now, what he didn't realize was that the older people took all that little bits and bytes of information and changed it into knowledge. And when you got really older, it became wisdom. But the little kids got the keys, but the older people didn't. And I've never told this to anybody else before. So if it seems blasphemous, I apologize to Tommy and to Billy and to all the other little boys who ran away from school and went on this adventure to open up all those gates. But actually what's happened is it's reversed the paradigm, because for the first time in history, the older person doesn't know how to get there. And so what 65% of people over the age of 65 are now saying today is they're leaving us behind. So if last Thanksgiving, or this coming Thanksgiving, look around the table and see if there are any of the older people, I mean people, not boomers, not topper of boomers, but old people, 80-year-olds, 90-year-olds, 100-year-olds, if there's anybody sitting at your table and sort of regressing, who doesn't understand the vocabulary. Because if you didn't get the vocabulary, if you were taking a nap, you're gone. It's too much to catch up with. And so my little moment of reflection happened in 1998, and I realized that this internet thing was fantastic. I love old people. And so, because you know, we're not going to be soccer players, we're not going to be black, we're not going to be disabled, all of us, but we're all going to get old if we're lucky. And I could not understand how in the hell we can have this paradigm where you're ashamed to get old. So I love old people, right? Anyway, so I started to ask every older person I saw, don't you love this thing called the internet? Because it takes you anywhere. And you can be a little deaf, and it's okay. And they say, oh no, dear, I'm too old. Oh, I couldn't possibly, I'm too dumb. And the people we were talking to were like college professors, the dean of the law school, people who had become marginalized. So when you watch them this Thanksgiving, you watch and see if their eyes glaze over. As people start to talk about browsers and bandwidth, what the hell is this? It isn't fair. So what we started, after I did that, I had a focus group. I was still gainfully employed. And I asked an old friend of my mother's, a university woman, if she would bring some people to her home, to her apartment. I could interview as a, quote, focus group. Well, what's it about? Well, the thing about a focus group is I can't tell you what it's about. What do you have to tell me? Well, it's about computers. She called back 2 days later and she said, Tobey, I can't get a soul. They hate it. I said, okay, don't ask them about computers. Can you find anybody who wants to talk to me about how she talks to her grandchildren? She called back 2 hours later and said, I had to stop at 21. And people wanted the connection. Older people don't see the value in these new media. The hassle outweighs the value, right? This is a generation that respects tools. They don't want to break it. So it isn't so much about the cost, but the 3 barriers are the access, skill, and the greatest of these is intimidation. Access, skill, and intimidation. These are the barriers. This is what is keeping your grandmother, your great-grandmother, maybe your mother, from not going online. All we had to do was figure that out. Access, skill, and intimidation. If you can figure out what the barriers are, then you know how to take them down. And so by access, it's put it where they are. So we put this simplified, de-skilled, the instructions are on every page, every screen in large type, in plain English, on every page, in public libraries, senior centers, nursing homes, and poor people's housing, because it's not only that if you're 70, you probably have like only an 11% chance of being online. But if you're poor and of color and 70, you're really not there. Like 11% are online, and it's not changing. So when you hear that the fastest growing cohort in the internet are older people, it isn't true. It's true for 55 to 64. Well, yeah, but I don't consider that older if you're going to live to be 95. So this is just a simplified way of reconnecting the generations, and it's called Generations Online. You can see it. You can go to generationsonline.org, and you can write to me, and I can give you a way to get to the software. But the important thing is the value, the goods are out there, and it's going to happen increasingly as we have these horizontal new media. And that's what I think we should all put our minds to, is let's not forget that this is a new disability. If you are internet illiterate, you have a disability. And the people who have that the most are people over 65. So I will just close in the words of our oldest user, who started when she was 99. She's 104. Hello, Catherine. And she's online every day. But she had a stroke when she was 101, I guess. And so it's really hard when you have a stroke to get what's in your mind out of your mouth. She can't say her prayers out loud every night. She's done this for 100 years. She said her prayers, and now she can't say them. Yet she can use the internet. For some reason, it overcomes that barrier. And so she wrote to me, and she was interviewed for us for the New York Times. She can communicate. She just can't communicate orally. And so she wrote, and she said, I went to the doctor the other day and asked him a million questions because I just didn't understand. And he was not helpful. And so I came home and I used the internet. And now I understand why I am the way I am, and I can accept it. And I thought you'd want to know how, where a doctor failed, the technology helped. So here's to technology. Thank you.
We certainly have questions that you're not running off.
No, I don't, but I know that Howard and Nicole want to speak.
Well,
No, I don't.
everybody wants to speak, but a couple of quick questions. What do the older people want online? What is viral to them?
We did a survey. Oh, okay. What older people want is what you want. Guess what? We did a survey of the first 1,000 users for the first 7,000 searchers. We're talking about newbies, and mostly poor people. So that is, you know, it's a stratification. These are people who had never touched a computer before. What do you think? What do you think they were looking for? Say?
Just said Britney Spears because it's what.
Britney Spears. No, but that's because which is you want. But no, but you're closer. We actually did a speech at NIH at the SPRI conference, and a press release, and the headline was, "It's not osteoporosis, it's Oprah Winfrey." That was their first action. We did it 3 years later, the same study, but with a much larger, we've helped 25,000 people now in 48 states in 1,240 places. And now the top thing, sex rated 22, and, but it's travel, family names, old cars was a special thing, music. It's the same exact things that we find out from the other places. So I think the lesson to take away from that is what people, they don't want to dwell on what they're used to dwelling on. It's the lifelong learning. And
So they want to learn something new and explore.
they want to pursue. If you used to be an embroiderer like Hazel Poole, who's 98, she can no longer embroider. When she got on the internet, she learned that she could be head of the embroidery newsletter.
So it is a
Before you take the thing, you know, it occurs to me that there's a huge commercial opportunity for not necessarily the poorest, but the iTunes and music stores of the net typically ignore the music of your life, classical music, music from the 50s and the 40s type music, because typically it was never made into CDs, so therefore it's not easily available as digital recordings, therefore it's never sold online. But if you could tap into the the music companies and make them listen to the possibilities, I'm sure that there are people there, if you say that one of their biggest searches is on music, you could give them the music that they remember as the music that they love, they'd probably pay for it. And there's a huge potential opportunity for that. It's not the biggest problem in the world. It's certainly not an uplift problem, except for that music
But
makes people's lives happier.
you've got to have a hook too, because
Right.
if email, which I think is vastly overrated for the older population, as one woman said to me, honey, you put the check in the mail and the kid opens the envelope. You know, I mean, so one of the things we have is a intergenerational conversation where children in the 4th grade ask questions about the past.
Wow.
And so that was the driver, because people love to tell their stories about the past. Music is a very, thank you, that's a good idea.
Keep there. One of the other topics that we talked about was on YouTube, Geriatric 1927, a 79-year-old man talking about the war. He's one of the most favorited speakers on YouTube, 5 times the subscriptions of Britney Spears, at least a month ago. But he's telling these stories, which are, there's just all kinds of comments saying, you know, Grandpa, tell us about this and that. So I think the intergenerational dialogue, I think, is very interesting to me. And I've heard this from others. Bliss Brown with Imagine Chicago has some very powerful things for intergenerational dialogue in Chicago. And an older person talking to a younger person outside of school or family or authority, just 2 people at different stages in life. And that's another pattern. I thought about this in Africa also, where you're a whole missing generation in Africa, passing on culture, the younger people learning what it's like for the old people. So there's a whole lot of culture that's being lost. And so formally structuring these intergenerational contexts. Do any of your people use YouTube, or anybody, this 101-year-old woman talking their story, is that?
The Martin Slobodkin, who's M. Harris 1927 on YouTube now, was one of these geniuses who was a reluctant technophobe. I mean, he was a very avid technophobe, a reluctant internet user. And I asked him as a favor in Boston, in Cambridge, if he would just evaluate what we were creating, just to bulletproof it. And once he realized that you can do it and it's easy, he started to use the internet, which broke down, and this is an interesting technology transfer, if you break down the first reluctance to interactivity, which is a new mechanism to these people. We're talking about people who typically do not use ATM, automatic teller machines. The interactive, you push it here, it comes up there immediately, is an anathema. So Martin Slobodkin, under M. Harris, 1927, is now on YouTube, and the subscriber rate has picked up immediately. He's telling about World War II from a live perspective. We have not tracked, I mean, our people are very isolated, and that's another reason that I think that this whole contagion could be something where the internet builds community. But if you don't know that that's a value or a feature of the internet, then you're not going to enter that support group or that community. So I think there is enormous potential. We haven't begun to tap it.
What about formal mentoring relationships, where someone says, I'm an embroiderer, I'll teach young people how to embroider? Is that something you think might work?
If for the older person to mentor the younger person in cyberspace, this is being done. Tom Tate is doing a great job with the 4-H people. In Canada, we have a situation where there's one-on-one. The fact is that getting over that initial barrier, all we're trying to do is find not the low-hanging fruit, but that real tough nut up there. And so in great part, we've only been seeking the reluctant users to get on the very basics. In terms of, can young people teach old people? No, it is a very bad idea to further embarrass your great-grandmother, to have the 10-year-old teach her. Peer-to-peer coaching really works the best for older people.